All right, everyone, welcome back to the Circle Club Show. I'm Tyrone. I'm here with special guest Mr. Corey of What's Next, our Marvel expert. Make sure you go and check his channel out because he makes Marvel content everywhere, TikTok, Instagram, you name it. We're talking She-Hulk today, episode 5. Now, if you've seen some of our videos in the past, you know we are a little iffy about this series, but I think this was final stamp for me, Corey. I kind of felt like, a lot of the things that I liked in episode 4, they kind of went away from, and we're back to where we started. We're back in the sitcom world. Last week was a sitcom too, but I think Wong helped sort of bring some seriousness to it. It just feels like this show was almost like filler, right? It feels as if it's filler to fill that void because we're not getting Marvel, but there's no serious stakes. One thing that really bothers me about the show is how they portray Jen in the writing. They almost make her incompetent at some points, or it feels like the only thing that matters to her is her job or getting a boyfriend, and it's like she seems like an intelligent woman. She's a lawyer. She's the best of the best at the firm. She's a banner, and that sort of irks me how they position her that way. I don't know if you feel that way.
Yeah, I feel like for her, it's well established that her and She-Hulk are one and the same, right? There's no two different personalities. It's just Jen, She-Hulk, same person, right? So to your point, right, she's obviously a very intelligent individual, right? Down to the point where she even knows to win her case, she has to basically embarrass herself to prove a point, right?
Yep.
She's very intelligent, right? And the show has made it very clear at times the stance it has from a woman's perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Jen starts talking about being catcalled, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
So they've really, I think, tried to establish a tone that Jen is not a weak woman, right? She's not kind of falling into these stereo
Stereotypical female
stereo
tropes.
thank you
Yeah.
stereotypical tropes, right? But then you have her almost leaning on some of those stereotypical tropes, right? She's almost like this, oh, I want a boyfriend, right? And like she's almost caving to using the advantage of She-Hulk to make that happen, right? And I feel like the tone that they were trying to set with Jen was Jen is Jen, right? And she's always kind of, even though she is being called She-Hulk and she's warming up to that idea, she is very confident in herself, right? And I think they're making that to be a farce, really, within this show, right? It's almost just an act to her, and she's saying that she has it all together, but she really doesn't, right?
Right.
And I think that's almost playing into those stereotypical tropes where like she's being the victim, right? Like she's letting the situation get to her. And I think when you think about like some of the videos we talk about with like House of the Dragon, right, and Rhaenyra, and almost like the confidence she ensues, right? She doesn't kind of fall into those easy traps like we talk about, right? I just feel like it's just too inconsistent with how they've been trying to establish the character through some of the dialogue that they have actually spoken versus what the actions are actually transpiring in these more recent episodes. And I think one of the things I have a problem with too, right, and I've mentioned it in some of our videos, like it feels too sitcom-esque, like these cameos with just celebrities that pop in and out, right? I think the thing about episode 4 that was so enjoyable compared to all these other episodes was, regardless of the Donnie Blaze tease and it not being Ghost Rider, you felt like there was more of that involvement. Like, hey, She-Hulk, like we mentioned, like there's no running away from this. You got to fight, right? And I feel like they haven't really leaned into that enough, right? It still just feels like this Jen Walters situation where she's just trying to keep it going. And I think it's getting too repetitive at this point. We know eventually she's going to have to break through and she's going to have to accept the superhero role. She might still be a lawyer, right? And do some of like the Matthew Murdock type stuff, but more open, having known that she's actually She-Hulk. But I just feel like it's just the tires. It's almost going back to everything we always say with all these shows, right? It's just the pacing is just not there, right? And I think this is the show that the pacing is really detrimental because there's not a lot of pros to I think what they
Yes.
have also going on, where a lot of those other Disney Plus shows and Marvel shows did have some pros to outweigh those cons, with like the pacing and things like that.
Yeah, and I also feel like even though some of those other shows, like okay, if we talk about what's the worst MCU show, like everyone always says Hawkeye, but even in Hawkeye, we still got this new character who was sort of learning who she was, and Kate Bishop, sort of understanding how it is to be like there's this idea of what a superhero is versus reality, and which was the sort of the first we got to see of that. Someone who was directly inspired the next generation, right? You had
Totally.
you had moments where you have cameos because that's what everyone loves in MCU, right? Is the cameos. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
You but at the same time, it was like Hawkeye was like there was a purpose. He was passing the torch almost.
They
Where like
did they did a great job with the emotional attachment with Kate Bishop. That was the key with that show, right? Even
yeah,
though to us it was the lowest on the totem pole, right? And
yes,
when we talk about like the worst MCU shows, where we to this point really haven't hated any show, right? We've
yeah,
had our gripes with it, but we
yeah,
always thought they were at least okay,
yeah. They
especially
were
like Hawkeye,
decent.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean about those pro elements. I think Kate Bishop was a great introduction. There's a lot of emotional attachment to her. Watching her be this get inspired by Hawkeye and seeing where it all starts from, what she ends up doing, and getting herself prepared to be almost the next Hawkeye. But
Mm-hmm.
watching that dynamic between really a beat down Hawkeye who finally has his family but clearly has the scars from all the things that has happened over the year open up to somebody like Kate Bishop who's just super excited. She's like the freshman on the football team who just wants to be BFFs with the seniors, right? And they're kind of like,
Yes.
buddy, take it easy. But it was
Right.
enjoyable to
Right.
watch with this show, right? There's really none of that. Like I there's just nothing that I can point to and say this is making me excited, because the only
Yeah.
thing that really, like I said, made me excited was the thought that maybe we had Johnny Blaze finally
Yeah.
in the universe, and even
And
that was just a big tease at the end of the day.
and I
So
think when we talk about let's just talk about episode 5 for a second. Like, so you have Jamila Jamil come back, Tatiana or Tati, whatever her name is, right? Her as a villain isn't that super interesting. But one thing about
mm,
She-Hulk that is sort of interesting to me is how they take the legal world and they're like, all right, let's use the legal world and approach that or connect it somehow. So this week we have a case of copyright. Maybe next week's episode is about defamation. Or there's like it's sort of like they're bringing in those legal world, that legal terms, those things. But at the end of the day, because these episodes, people are talking about 20 minutes long. Like these episodes are 15 when you take out the credits and the recap and all that. Like these are super short episodes. There's really not a lot to do here, and I think that's creating these issues. And I don't know if that's because the budget or it's because it's difficult to CGI or what the case may be. Because with Hulk, obviously they have all these stem cells from all these other projects. They're making this fresh, brand new. But it just feels that the whole thing feels rushed. And I know that there are women writers on this show, women directors and all, but it almost still feels like they're taking the male perspective with some of the things. Like to your point with Game of Thrones, right? Like we just saw in the most recent episode of House of Dragon, that was directed by a woman, and it had purpose behind it. You could tell the intentions. You can tell that there was a difference. With She-Hulk, it doesn't feel that different than some of these other things. And like Miss Marvel feels very specific towards this Pakistani character, right? You're getting her roots. You're getting to know who she is. Jen, I don't know. As you said, there's really not this separation of her and She-Hulk, and yet
mm.
they during some scenes they sort of almost want us to feel like there is. And the other thing is like it just I get what they're trying to go for with some of these men are toxic, men are bad things, but it feels almost as if she has no one in her circle, no one in her life who isn't a toxic male person, or no one can learn from it. And then honestly, sometimes inside of the actual legal firm, it almost feels like junior high school or like something like that. Like some of the
Thank you.
comments and things back and forth,
I was
where it's like, if this is set in 2022, that sort of behavior, especially when you're a big name like She-Hulk, that would never fly without sort of some repercussions or people talking. And I guess
Mm.
it does happen in real life, but like when you're a name like She-Hulk and you have the Avengers and all these people backing you, I don't know. I'm not buying it.
Yeah, and I think that's where like my sitcom piece comes from it, right? And I think it's very difficult to do a lawyer show and also make it a sitcom, in
Sitcom,
my
right?
opinion,
Yeah,
because at the end of the day, right? I mean, of course it's a TV show, right? So to not lay out too many jokes, but we all know the
sure,
legal system is not that great to solve these
right,
cases in 20 minutes. But
yeah,
benefit of the doubt, it's a TV show, right? But
sure,
the tonality within the courtroom, within the interactions with the lawyers, right? It just seems way too unserious
correct.
that just adds to the really fuel to the fire and me not really enjoying the show. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so like even thinking like I'm not trying to deviate from episode 5, but even thinking back to like the elf, the Asgardian elf who changes like skin, like it's just making a mockery of the courtroom, right? And it's
Right,
like
right.
this is just like it's not really that funny to me, right? And maybe it's just
No.
my own bias and my own humor, right? And everybody
Yeah.
has their own humor, but it just seems like a TV show that is not serious at all. It's trying to be funny, and throughout that entire process within these episodes, it doesn't have enough time to get us really attached to anything at all,
Yeah,
right?
because like when
The
you look at
villain, the villains, the side characters, the main character, right? Like I
yeah,
just don't have any real
well,
attachment, which I think leads to some of these jokes not being as funny, leads
mm-hmm.
to some of the things that we start critiquing a little bit more seriously, right? Because I don't really feel like it's found its rhythm just yet.
Yes,
It keeps bouncing between
that's the key thing to
what
me
it's
is
trying
what
to
you just
do.
said is the rhythm isn't there. There's no cadence. We don't really know. Like if Moonlight drops a new episode tomorrow, we kind of know what to expect. If Miss Marvel drops one, we know what to expect. Loki, we know what to expect. We don't really know what to expect next week for She-Hulk. It feels that the tone has changed. The script is different each week, and it just really hasn't found its footing, which is a shame because like we said, I think there is potential here. I mean, you look at like a show like How to Get Away with Murder, CSI, Law, SVU, all these shows, right? Like there's a precedence there where people are interested in the legal world and all this, and that's the other thing that you made up a great point. It's like, you know, this is obviously this is a fictional world, but like the legal system is a pretty serious thing to take on, and I feel like, you know, one of the great things about Marvel, and that's why I love the X-Men, is like you can use that to sort of mirror things that are going on in real life and talk about
Mm-hmm.
like real issues and bring people in. And it feels that they haven't done that with this at
Mm-hmm.
all. Where it's like, you know, you can make a commentary about, hey, the legal system, you get caught and there's nothing you can do about it. You can make a commentary to be like, hey, you know, you get a good you serve your time and you have good behavior in jail, prison, whatever, you get time off, or like there's just no commentary about this, and it almost feels like, why are you even a lawyer? Like I don't know why Jin became a
Yeah.
lawyer, and it doesn't feel that
Yeah.
that's really showcased or answered. So,
This is what I think this is where I think it really leads to the end result of how we feel about this show.
mm-hmm,
When we feel like, given everything that's playing out, that we can't take it seriously, right? Like we're almost taking a lawyer not serious just because of how sitcom like it is. It in turn makes us as the audience members not take She-Hulk seriously,
correct,
right? It's like,
correct,
okay, so you're going up against Titania, who's just really an influencer, who has some type of superpower. I can't
copyright,
even really tell, like,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like it's just the association to what she's going to just makes her feel not serious, right? Like even the Abomination, or like Abomination should be this big threat, and the way they had him played off, it was like,
a joke,
okay,
yeah,
so it was just a big joke with
yeah,
Abomination, right? And then like you with understanding that Frogman's coming into it too, right? Like you're not helping your case by putting that man in there as well, right? Donnie Blaze, you're just dealing with just a wannabe magician, right? It's just like the
yeah,
threats are not serious, and
no,
this is the problem I'm gonna have with it because of the pacing piece. Something is will happen in this show where she's forced to have to be the superhero and take
yeah,
on a larger threat. I just, based on everything we've been seeing, do not believe she can take on a larger threat at the end of this show, right?
We saw her take those street level fighters, right, and that was a little moment, and we haven't really seen much since then. And it just, to
Yeah.
your point, we know that moment's gonna come. We're gonna not believe it, and it's just leaving her flat. And I feel, it's sad, but when you're dealing with a woman or a minority superhero, I feel like you just need to give it way better attention and detail and give people something to go wow or chew on, and I feel like, again, to bring up Miss Marvel, even if you didn't like that character or no, by the end, if you watch the full series of Miss Marvel, by the end you're rooting for that character, you're invested in that character, you liked her. I remember when we first started, I don't think this will be really for us, and they changed us. So we aren't people who go into shows with like, this is my thought on this, and if they didn't want, if they didn't, my last point, then I'll let you finish us off, is if they wanted She-Hulk to not be a serious character, then it feels strange that she would be a lawyer, which is a pretty serious role, and I think that just, and to me, again, if that was the internal conflict of, I'm not a serious person, but my job is serious, show us that, have her go out, have her do things, but like, she sort of lives a boring life, she's pretty bland, but then it's like, all of a sudden, we're supposed to expect her to be funny and loose and look at the camera. Like, you don't break fourth wall if you're not a funny character, you know what I'm saying? And who her character is, Jen and She-Hulk, both really aren't comedic to me, so it feels very off.
Yeah, I feel like a better approach would have almost been a smart, almost like a, not like Deadpool where it's like very raunchy and derogatory, but almost like a smart ass, right? Like, she's a lawyer, she probably thinks she's a lot better, so she makes these like smart ass remarks through the fourth wall, like who does this guy think he is, right? Like, things like that I think would have been a little bit more.
Watch this next scene, like, watch this next scene.
Like she's just oozing confidence because she's this big time lawyer, she's She-Hulk, right? And like, I feel like that would have hit home a little bit more, would have been a little bit more realistic. Like, oh, she's kind of like you don't hate her, but she's got a little arrogance to her, right? Like, like that. I think also, thinking back on the MCU and how they've treated Hulk, I really find it hard to believe that they would just start praising She-Hulk off the bat and not have a little bit more government involvement, given the fact that typically when a Hulk is around, the government really likes knocking on the door because they've been itching to get that blood forever, right? So why is it now with She-Hulk they just have no worries about her out and about, right? That's something that I just don't find too realistic. And I know you could lean on, well, Bruce is on everyone's good side right now, they helped save the world, that don't mean anything.
That's another thing too. It's like, Bruce is the cousin. I feel like that should be involved a little bit more. People give her a little bit of nepotism, people kind of give her certain attention, but like, it's just, they don't do a good job of that. They really don't.
I just don't feel like all the pieces that have ever always been laid out in the MCU have really come to fruition in this show, and that's what I think we're always been saying, right? This just feels so misplaced to what we've been teeing up, right? Especially with some of these new projects like Moon Knight, like Miss Marvel. We understand the tone, we understand kind of where they fit in. With She-Hulk, I really don't see where she fits in. She right now reminds me almost like a Kate Bishop / Spider-Man when he first started out. Like, you are not ready for the Avengers at all, right? Like, so I could see her leaning more towards those maybe West Coast Avengers, that younger team that's very immature, but needs that Hulk strength, right? So I think that's where they can lean, and I think it will work if they use like almost the immaturity within that team, like a Kate Bishop. Even though she grew on us and took the steps, she still is young, full of energy, might be getting herself involved with things that she probably shouldn't just yet, right? So having her She-Hulk maybe play into that ignorance would help out, but again, I just think everything that they've laid out just doesn't align for a good formula at the end of the day for the
final thing I'll say is, to your point, I think you're correct. Like, when she was talking about, hey, you guys like Wong, she was sort of being a smart ass about it, and talking about Twitter, right? Like, she was sort of being like wink wink at the camera, yeah, okay, you guys don't like my show, whatever, right? And like, I feel like her being a smart ass and sort of like, checking people, right? Like that sort of works. But sometimes when they have her check people, it's almost from this point of like, oh, you're not gonna tell a woman this, blah blah blah, and it's like. I just that doesn't really seem like her personality to be confrontational like that, And then so when they have her do that, sometimes it just doesn't feel obvious. This character has so many different personalities and traits and things about it that it doesn't mesh, it doesn't fit. It feels like she's almost 2, 3, 4 different characters in one. And so I don't know. It's not working for me. Not working for you right now. We will watch episode 6 next week. So make sure you guys go ahead and click that subscribe button because we make new content every single week. We make quick, under a minute recaps on TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, all that as well. So if you like the content, make sure you come and have a conversation with us. Join in. Corey, what's next?
Yeah, what's next, guys? We'll be covering, obviously, She-Hulk, like Tyrone said, but we also do be discussing House of the Dragon, as you could hear me mention a few times in here. One of our favorite shows. We'll be back Sunday night live after every single episode release. We play no games. We waste no times. We're giving it to you raw, unfiltered. So if you want to stay tuned, check us Sunday night on our live for House of the Dragon. We'll also post our thoughts and predictions off of the trailer. But subscribe to our channel, follow our socials so you stay up to date with what we got going on.
All right, people, that's gonna do it for this episode. We'll see you next week in the next video.